Michelle Thomson is the MSP for Falkirk East, SNP, MSP, it's got to be said as well. Michelle, is it more difficult when you are a female in politics, and is Nicola Sturgeon, or has she been someone that's been quite evident that it's tricky to sort of have that balance between empathy, warmth externally, and also holding that position of power?
It's undoubtedly harder to be a female politician. The evidence tells us that female politicians are subjected to considerably more abuse on social media, for example. And you correctly allude to the point that if they're strong, then people make commentary that they're unfeeling and unflinching and so on. So it's definitely much harder, and I'm sure it's been much harder for Nicola Sturgeon in that respect.
Do you think that's part of the purpose of this book? Because, a lot of people might suggest this is a way, and I mentioned it at the top of the programme, about trying to reshape the political narrative around her legacy.
Well, I think the purpose of this book is a bit of reputation repair, and it's clearly a positioning book for the rest of her career. And I heard somebody on earlier talking about the timing was interesting. Well, the timing is absolutely perfect if you've got an eye on what opportunities are going to be made available to you when, the Parliament goes into the next election and she's no longer an MSP. I think there's a bit of reputation repair, and it does no harm to create a narrative, as you would say, around Nicola the person as compared to Nicola the politician. So I see it. The bits, I must concede, I haven't read the book yet. I've read sections.
You can be forgiven for that. It was only yesterday.
in the media, but I think it's clearly a positioning piece for her future career, and the timing alludes to that as well.
What is Nicola the person like?
I have no idea. I've never had a conversation with her in all my time in politics, either as an MP in Westminster or an MSP. And you may have heard other people comment that she tended not to ever speak to anybody unless she had to. And she did, of course, clearly talk to the people that are very much in her tent, but I never had a conversation with her. And even times when I was with her, I would have the sense that I was talking at her to fill in some quite awkward gaps, but, I wouldn't really get any sense of who she was from, the other side coming back. I saw her, I would speak at certain things with her during the independence referendum, and I could see her perform very well as a sociable, garrulous, entertaining woman. But I never actually had a conversation with her personally at all.
Did you find that quite unusual?
I find it quite odd, actually. I felt that I'm not sure to this day, is she afraid of showing who she really is? Does she know who she really is? Because surely there can't be any harm in sharing, stories about the weather. That's often a typical thing that people will go to, or what you were doing at the weekend or anything like that. So I suppose I do think that is quite odd. And I suppose that is a reflection I would have. I think had she been prepared to basically, in my old management career, management by walking about was very common. You shoot the breeze with people, and it always gave you gems of how they're thinking, taking a temperature check. And had she been able to do that, just chat away to people, she would have probably got a much better sense of how people were really feeling, because people love to tell you how they're feeling, and I include her backbenchers in that.
It's interesting because you think about what it takes to be a leader, and I suppose there's only a certain amount of people who really truly understand what it feels like to sit in that chair, and it's very difficult at times to try and criticise somebody who's done that when you can barely begin to imagine the pressure that someone must have been feeling in that position. But do you think that was almost like her coping strategy to make sure she could manage all the things that was required, and the requirements and pressure that was on just singly her shoulders?
I definitely agree with you. People don't appreciate how extraordinarily difficult these roles are. And I say this about anybody of any political party, to be in the top seat and having to make difficult decisions, endless accommodations. This is really, really tough. And I would say that about everybody. And I guess people need to decide themselves how they choose to cope with that and their coping strategies. And we could all be guessing it could be the case that that was a coping strategy for Nicola Sturgeon not to engage with people, and that's a choice, and that's a legitimate choice. I'd be guessing if I said that was the case, but I would also reflect, though, that where that isn't the case, that means that you miss the gems of properly engaging with people. And I heard, your earlier discussion where people were talking about the issues around the gender debate. It's my assertion that had she been willing to sit down with women's groups, with women, with people who have been sexually assaulted and raped, and understood their perspective, we wouldn't have ended up in the mess, frankly, that the SNP has been over this issue really for quite some time. So if it was her choice to keep herself, a strategy by not engaging, that can work in some instances, but I would contend it didn't work in the gender debate because she missed a lot of critical insights. Like, for example, somebody might have said, kind of not a good idea to lock up a male rapist in a women's prison, and allow him to refer himself to as a woman, and indeed the woman he's raped, to require her to refer to him as a woman. Somebody might have had the chance to say that. And so the flip side is she missed out on that opportunity.
And she says that she she's expressed regrets over her handling of that. But this morning she said on Radio 4 that she's not going to apologise for that. And again, it's getting under the skin and trying to understand the decisions that were made at the time, the reasons that the decisions, or the reasons why she reached these particular decisions. And it helps, I guess, shine a little bit of light on that as well, whatever the outcome and the harm that's been caused since that point.
Well, I have no insight on what on earth could possibly be the reasons for refusing to speak to any women's groups, for refusing to speak to her backbenchers, for refusing to speak to women who had been sexually assaulted and raped, and ask, why are you concerned? I cannot see any reasonable reason. And of course, she's not going to apologise. There's a saying amongst many politicians, never explain, never apologise, because they perceive that it's weakness to do that.
Was saying that there should have been a pause, was that enough?
No, she was asked for a pause quite clearly. We got no feedback from the second round of consultations, and not only did she refuse to pause, she refused to speak to anybody. And I suppose what I'm saying is, this goes back to the early commentary. If the new blinking, emerging Nicola Sturgeon is coming into the sunlight, where she wants to presumably fashion a new career where she's a talking head, media darling on the London circuit, she will need to be prepared to show humility and deep honesty. And I think the suggestion of a pause, she knew she had to give something on the gender debate, but a pause was never nearly enough. We've ended up, she's achieved the unbelievable stance of making trans people's lives worse, and has caused a lot of consternation and deep angst about women who've had concerns about their rights to private spaces being removed. So I think, for me, the reflection that, actually, being completely honest here, I could have done a lot better. I could have started with listening, engaging, and using some of that empathy that I claim to have. And I just don't think she did that. And of course, she's doubling down. I fully expect that, because that's part of the never explain and never apologise. But, and in fairness, I would also say there is rather more to her. She's not defined
Well, that's, yeah, exactly.
By the gender debate.
But it's an awful large part, isn't it, that people will talk about. And I guess part of also that reputational repair that you spoke about. Michelle, it's... Say that again, sorry?
She's not going to get reputational repair unless she concedes. I mean, if she looked somebody in the eye and said, I thought I was doing the right thing by allowing a rapist to be locked up with women in prison, and I thought I was doing the right thing by ensuring that the person he had raped must address him in a court through the court case by she, and I thought I was doing the right thing by whipping my SNP group to vote against the amendment I put forward that people shouldn't be allowed to get a gender recognition certificate if they've been accused of serious sexual assault or rape, then she should say, I thought I was doing the right thing. But the problem is that is utterly unpalatable to your average person in the street. So she's doubling down.
It's been really great to get your thoughts on this, Michelle. Great insight from you. Thanks so much for your time this morning.
Okay, no problem. Thanks. Bye.
Bye. Michelle Thomson there, SNP MSP for Falkirk East.